Hello, comrades, and welcome back to Ushanka Show. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи. Hey, if you still don't know me, my name is Sergei, and I was born in the USSR. Today we're gonna cover one of the questions that I got, and the question is, which ones do you think people have a better life? When it was Soviet Union or now? I mean, a better life for average per people. For example, ease of finding job, getting daily needs, etc. I already posted that question on my YouTube community page, and there was a quite an interesting response from, say, all three sides, left, right, and middle. And there was another comment about it, comment and a question. So millions of retirees who are incredibly poor right now because of every former state was Soviet state was gutted. They just run, right? So, when people, average people, had a better life during Soviet Union or now? This basic question is actually quite difficult, and I'll do my best trying to explain my point of view. It's difficult because it's really easy to mix things up answering the question. Like we want to compare apples to apples. It won't be fair to compare apples to oranges, or as we say, it's not right to compare a finger with a penis. So let's try to compare apples to apples first when it comes to retirees. The catch here is that a lot of people who complain, like retirees now in Russia, Ukraine, who complain that their life became way worse compared with Soviet Union, they never were retirees or pensioners, as we say, back in the Soviet Union. Well, think about it. Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, almost 30 years ago. It's easy for me to watch the numbers because I was born in 1971, so I was 20 in 1991, and I will be 50 in 2021. I will be 50 in 2021, and it's going to be the 30th anniversary since the collapse of the Soviet Union. So in 2021, there'll be 30 years since Soviet Union collapsed. Now, the retirement age in Soviet Union was 60 years for men and 55 years for women. So if you look at the last year of the Soviet Union, 1991, those people who retired in 1991, in a couple of years, in 2021, men will be 90 and women will be 85. So I'm trying to say, we pretty much we shouldn't have right now many retirees, Soviet retirees left. Like they are dying out. If you retired in the last year of 1991, if we're talking people who retired in 80s, they definitely dead by now. So when we compare apples to apples, we need to find retiree from the Soviet days, like maybe from 80s, and compare to the modern days retirees. So let's talk about my grandma Maria. She was born in 1907, so she retired somewhere around 1963-65. If collective farm workers could retire at 55, I think was the same age, because otherwise collective time workers, peasants, had a really different situation about their work conditions, and they didn't really get paid for their work. So my grandma's pension was 12 rubles a month. And I remember it really well because it was one of my responsibilities. I would borrow a bicycle and I'd ride to post office downtown village, the one that I showed you. If you guys watch my videos about modern Ukraine, I showed that postal office. So that's about 2 kilometers. So I'll ride the bike and I'll pick it up grandma's pension and take back to our place. And the buying power of 12 rubles was pretty weak. Can we say that? And if you watch my videos about what could you buy for 1 kopeck, 2 kopecks, 5 kopecks, I calculated that at the prices during the 80s, and keep in mind that bread prices were subsidized quite heavily by government. My grandma could purchase 75 loaves of bread for 12 rubles at that time. If we look at the prices for vodka, I know it's a horrible comparison, but it was about 3 rubles per bottle to buy a bottle of vodka. So my grandma's pension was enough to buy 4 bottles of vodka. So picture if you right now can buy a bottle of vodka for $15. So your pension was 15 times 4, $60 a month. So it's like if you're looking at the prices of vodka in America right now, so that equals to $60 a month. That's what my grandma's pension was. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like prices for color TVs in United States and in the Soviet Union around early 1980s were about the same. We had 600 rubles in Soviet Union, and here 19-inch color TV was about $600. So the difference, yours TV had remote control and Soviet electrons didn't have remote controls at that time. And I don't know what would be the average social security check for some farmer or some kind of agriculture worker back in 80s, but my grandma, in order to buy a color TV, she had to wait and save every penny, every kopeck, for over 4 years in order to buy a color TV. So no wonder most peasants in our village, if they had a TV, it would be black and white, but a lot of people around, they didn't have TV at all, like my grandparents, and those ones that have TVs, they were old black and white models from 70s. But the key numbers, my grandma's pension during the Soviet Union in the early 1980s was 12 rubles, equal 75 loaves of bread at the government subsidized prices. And now let's jump in the present day and look at my mother's pension. So she worked for many years. I think her stage, so they also take into calculation how many years you worked. She's getting right now 2,000 hryvnias. It's her pension, and it's about $80 if you calculate. It's currently the rate of exchange is 25 hryvnias per each dollar. And that's not a lot of money. It's slightly above the minimal pension right now in Ukraine. But still, with that pension, that it's not enough to live in the city because utility is going to pretty much take most of it if you own an apartment like in Kiev. But she still, with 2,000 hryvnias, my mother could purchase right now 166 loaves of bread. Same bread, same bakery as my grandma could buy only 75. So if you compare apples to apples, breads to breads, current pensions is actually not almost, more than double buying power comparing with what my grandmother had in early 1980. Of course, you can say, well, Comrade Sergei, it doesn't make sense. Why would people complain that their life standards dropped drastically after Soviet Union collapsed if, according to your calculations, your grandma pension was twice less than your mother's pension? And my mom complains, my father who is in Kiev, and he makes about $100 a month, so he makes a little bit more than my mom makes, earns in the pension. They both complain that it's not enough money. So let's look at that angle. In my unprofessional opinion, because I'm not an economist or anything like that, the Soviet Union was quite a comfortable country for poor people. So they didn't pay a lot to workers. They paid literally peanuts to the retirees. But because the housing was not expensive, you didn't own the housing. If you like it to get an apartment from the government, it was like a really inexpensive rent. And utilities were also very, very inexpensive. So it was way more comfortable, easier to be a poor person in Soviet Union versus modern days when we have market forces. So of course, prices went up quite a bit on many things. On some items they went down, like cars got way cheaper comparing what Lada was costing in 70s and 80s. So now it's not comfortable to be a poor person in Russia or Ukraine. And I think that's the main difference. For example, Back in the Soviet days, like we lived in a 3-room apartment in Kiev. We had to pay based on the size of apartment. As I said, it was like a inexpensive rent. Well, in our case, we bought the apartment. I had a separate video about it. But if a person got the apartment for free from the government, or actually they get it from the place of their work. So most factories and other businesses, would say businesses, they had a waiting list. For example, you start a job and in 20 years, some places they claim in 10 years, after you wait, you'll get apartment. But you still have to pay based on how many rooms and how big is the apartment. There was just like maybe 7 or 10 rubles a month rent. And then utilities were very inexpensive. The only meter we had back in the Soviet days was only for electricity. So Soviet people were really aware about cost of electricity because it had a meter. So from day one, I learned as a kid to constantly turn the lights off. But at the same time, natural gas was unlimited. We never had any meter on the natural gas. So you can cook or burn your stove all day, same price. Same with the hot water and the cold water. Like we had actually 2 pipes going into sinks, so you have a hot water and cold water, no meters. So same thing, you can have it wide open all day, all night, and you pay the same price. But now everything changed. We had gas meter installed in our kitchen in Kiev. They had a water meter installed in the bathroom too. And now my brother, for example, he had to install his own boiler because it's cheaper to heat up the water locally versus getting hot water supply, like central hot water supply, and then you pay way more money. So they figure out it's cheaper to burn more electricity, but that way you're gonna save money on hot water supply. So now everything is metered: gas, water, and of course electricity. So all the utilities went up in price quite a bit. And currently, like in the winter, they had to pay about 1,400 hryvnias a month as utilities. And if your pension is 2,000 hryvnias and you have to pay 1,400 just to live in an apartment, there's not much money left to buy food. I'm not talking about even buy some clothing or any kind of entertainment. So if we compare life of the Soviet retiree versus the life of the retiree in the modern Ukraine, money-wise, modern retirees are ahead, but utility expenses jump quite a bit, and that's what pinched them really hard. And of course, in reality, you think, okay, if I had my own apartment that I can't afford in Kiev, there's a possibility to move out of the country to some village like my mother lives. You can purchase a house for $500, maybe $4,000, and then you can rent your apartment for $400 or $500 a month. And it's actually will be a great substitute to your income. You'll have more in rent, almost 5 times more, 6 times more in rent than you have in your pension. But of course, a lot of people, they grew up, especially who grew up in a city, they can't even think about something like that, just to abandon city, move out of the country, have this primitive country life, maybe use outhouse. They prefer to remain in the city and complain and ask for more money. But it's just mentality of people. So we finished comparing retirees to retirees, but now let's look at people who right now retired and like my mom, they baby boomers, so they worked during the Soviet days and now they retired, and they do complain because their income dropped significantly comparing what they worked in Soviet Union versus what they get as a pension now in Ukraine or Russia. But now we're not comparing apples to apples. I think most of the countries, your income drops after you quit working and you retire. The question is, in America, for example, what you can count, maybe $2,000-$3,000 a month Social Security payment if you worked all your life and made decent money. So it's, you can always also complain like my life got worse since I retired. I mean, I met quite a few Americans what were complaining, well, back when I used to work at Whirlpool and I was a manager, I could afford anything, but now I gotta watch my every penny. But, would you blame a system for it, or would you blame a person that they didn't save enough money, or, you know what I'm talking about. So, my father is a perfect example of baby boomer, Soviet baby boomer. He was born in 1946. And when I was asking him questions about pension and what he used to make, he actually got really upset and fired up. According to his calculations, he used to make 30,000 grivnas. Like if you compare, what you could buy, he's making right now, his pension is 2,500. He thinks he used to make in the same currency 30,000. So it's basically tenfold drop in your income. So of course it hurts. And I said, in situation like 1,400 goes for the utilities, and all you have left is just barely like $40 a month to spend on groceries and any other miscellaneous expenses. So the main problem I see with people who complain that their life got way worse since the collapse of Soviet Union, and those people are mostly retirees right now, is right at the end, in the early 90s, Soviet government blocked access to people's savings. Like we had the only bank in Soviet Union, Sberbank, and when the whole situation started unwinding and Soviet Union started being wobbly, if I can say it that way, they froze our bank accounts. Like people had no access to their savings. And one more time, it was done during Soviet Union by our communist leadership. And so they block the access to savings. I mean, everyday life people deal with cash. It's only savings that we kept in the bank. And I think they paid like 3% interest rate. But otherwise, you get paid at work with cash. You paid for everything cash. We didn't have anything like checks at all or money orders. It was cash, or you just put money in the savings account. So it was locked for years. I mean, Soviet Union collapsed, and those accounts were locked. Then inflation kicked in. So when finally in Ukraine they said, okay, now you have access to your money, for what my mom saved and was 5,000 rubles, you could buy 2 loaves of bread at that time. So we had a really horrible inflation. So our family lost 5,000 rubles, which is worth close to 2 years of family income. Together, my parents were making around 300 rubles a month while they're working. So once again, my grandma's pension was 12 rubles. My mom's salary was 120 rubles, 10 times more. So our family lost 5,000 rubles, huge amount of money. But I know many other people who lost quite more, way more. For example, mother of one of my friends, she was single mother, and she got pregnant by the military pilot who was married but never told her. So he was paying really good child support for years, and she never touched that money. She always put it in the Sberbank on her son's savings account. So she lost 25,000 rubles, 5 times more than we did. Huge amount of money, never got recovered, and that's happened all over the Soviet Union. So this is, I think, one of the major problems with modern days retirees. They were saving some money, maybe for kids, maybe for themselves, but then they got robbed by the Soviet Union government, by the communists. And then when they retired, the current pension is not sufficient, but then they lost all their savings from the Soviet days. So that would be, I'd say, main problem with their financial situations right now. But on the other hand, if you look at the pictures of Moscow in 1980s, and you look at the pictures of Moscow or Kiev in modern days, we have so many cars, we have traffic jams, we got all the Western McDonald's and supermarkets and high rises and business centers. So if you look like that way, it definitely seems as country become richer after collapse of the Soviet Union. If you ever travel to Europe, Paris, Spain, Greece, even United States, now you can always hear Russian voices. There's so many Russian tourists everywhere. During Soviet days, there'll be little groups escorted by KGB agents, and now thousands of Russians travel over the world. So there's quite a few people that have way better life now than they used to have during Soviet Union. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, if you have any questions, please post in the comments below this video. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share with your friends and on social media, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания, goodbye. Hey, by the way, cool merch for cool comrades is available at the Ushanka store at teespring.com. And if you love my channel and would like to show your support, please click on the link below this video and become the patron of the Ushanka Show. For as little as $1, you can help us grow and create the new, interesting videos about the life in Soviet Union.